Imagine this. You're thousands of feet above the Pacific, the roar of an engine drowning out every thought, the air vibrating with tension. Below, Rabaul Harbor gleams like a dagger, and above it, death is circling on silver wings. It's November 7th, 1943. At 14,000 feet, aviation machinist's mate, First Class Richard Parker, grips the twin handles of his .50 caliber machine guns, eyes locked on a diving Japanese Zero. It's coming in from the same deadly angle that's already claimed 3 of his squadron's rear gunners in the past 6 weeks. Parker, just 24 years old, has survived 8 months of aerial combat, fought through 17 engagements, and has 0 confirmed kills. That morning, the Japanese launched 32 Zeros to intercept the American bombers striking Rabaul. Parker's position, the tail of a Corsair, is the most exposed, the most fatal seat in the sky. The first man he replaced was David Martinez, aviation machinist's mate, second class, September 14th, 1943. Martinez did everything by the book, followed the Pensacola manual to the letter. Aim straight, lead the target by half a wingspan, fire when the sight picture's full. He did. His tracers streaked harmlessly behind a Zero. Then the enemy came in low from 9 o'clock, level, 4, perfect bursts. 4 perfect misses. A moment later, 20mm cannon shells ripped through the Corsair's fuel tank. Fire consumed the aircraft. Martinez never heard the pilot's last call. Next came Tommy Wilson, third class, October 3rd. He tried improvising, doubling his lead. 2 wingspans instead of 1/2. Still nothing. His bullets vanished into the sky. A Zero came head-on. Wilson fired desperately, knowing it was futile. The Japanese pilot, confident in his own immunity, pressed to within 200 yards and opened up. Cannon fire shredded the Corsair's engine. Wilson's aircraft spiraled down in smoke. His body was never recovered. Then James Coe, second class, died on October 27th. Same method, same outcome. Perfect form, 0 kills. By early November, Parker's squadron had lost 8 rear gunners in 6 weeks. Everyone knew the problem. The Pensacola deflection shooting method wasn't working, and yet they had no alternative. Now, picture Parker again, 14,000 feet over Rabaul. A Zero dives at him from 11 o'clock high, closing fast, over 400 miles per hour of combined speed. His training echoes in his head. Lead slightly. Fire when the target fills your sights. But something in him rebels. Instead of half a wingspan, he aims 8 full aircraft lengths ahead, into nothing. Lieutenant James Morrison throws the Corsair into a hard left bank. G-forces pin Parker into his seat. The gun sight shakes, his arms feel like lead, and the Zero streaks across his view faster than any human could compute. Parker squeezes the triggers. The twin 50s roar 500 rounds a minute. Empty casings fly past his face. The smell of cordite fills the air. At first, his tracers seem to carve through empty sky. Then, as if the world itself shifts, the Zero flies straight into them. Bullets shred its engine cowling. The propeller explodes into fragments. Smoke billows black across the sky. The Zero flips inverted and spirals down toward the ocean 4 miles below. "What the hell kind of shooting was that?" Morrison barks through the intercom. Parker can't answer. His hands are trembling, not from fear, but from realization. He'd just defied everything he'd ever been taught. He had aimed not where the enemy was, but where the enemy would be. And it had worked. 3 minutes later, 2 more Zeros appear. Parker tracks them at 10 o'clock. Standard Navy procedure says, half a wingspan of lead for every 100 knots of crossing speed. Simple, predictable, worthless. Parker makes his own calculation. Combined closing speed, 200 knots, bullet travel time, 1 second. He aims 10 aircraft lengths ahead, fires. The tracers reach out an incandescent line through the blue. The lead Zero flies directly into the stream. The canopy explodes, smoke trails as it dives. The second breaks away into clouds. "You're not aiming at them," Morrison says over the radio. "No, sir," Parker replies quietly. "I'm aiming at where they're going to be." "That's not what they taught at Pensacola." "I know, sir." A pause. 5 seconds of radio silence, then Morrison's calm voice. "Keep doing it." Over the next 40 minutes, Parker fires 3 more times. 2 more Zeros fall. 1 limps away in smoke. When Morrison lands the battered Corsair on the carrier deck, its tail riddled with bullet holes, Parker has unknowingly rewritten the rules of aerial gunnery. He doesn't yet know why it worked, but he will. The deflection problem wasn't new. It had haunted American air crews since Pearl Harbor. The 1942 Navy Gunnery Manual devoted 12 pages to the theory formulas, diagrams, perfect on paper, disastrous in practice. The flaw was speed. A Japanese Zero could turn tighter than nearly any Allied plane. Top speed, 330 miles. It could reverse direction in under 4 seconds. Each evasive twist rendered the neat mathematical lead obsolete. American training assumed the enemy would fly straight, an assumption that had already killed hundreds. Between December 1941 and October 1943, over 800 American aircraft were lost in the Pacific, many because their gunners couldn't hit maneuvering targets. The manual taught, estimate speed, angle, calculate lid, fire. But in the real sky, by the time a gunner pulled the trigger, the Zero had already danced away. Rear gunners like Parker faced the worst of it, shooting from a moving, vibrating turning platform, trying to track another moving turning target. The Navy's solution? More training, more practice, more math. None of it fixed the problem. And there was another cruel limitation: ammunition. A Corsair rear position carried only 1,500 rounds total. Sounds like plenty, until you realize the twin 50s ate through that in 3 minutes of sustained fire. To conserve ammo, gunners fired short 2-second bursts, 90 bursts for an entire mission. Miss the first few, and your odds of survival plummeted. Japanese pilots knew all this. They trained to exploit it. When tracer fire appeared, they'd jink hard left, right, up, down, what Americans called the Zero dance. Unpredictable, elegant, deadly. By the end of the first year of the Pacific War, U.S. rear gunners achieved confirmed hits in only 6% of engagements. 94% of the time, their rounds vanished into the void. Officers knew it. The statistics were brutal. But they clung to the system backed by math, by doctrine, by experts in Pensacola, who'd never faced a Zero's guns. Parker, after 8 months and 17 fruitless fights, had every reason to give up on the manual. On November 7th, he finally did. He aimed where instinct, not training, told him to. A place that felt wrong, that looked empty, and for the first time, the bullets and the enemy met. The truth was bigger than Parker. Across the Pacific, every gunner was facing the same invisible wall. The deflection doctrine depended on predictable, rational flight. The Japanese fought like chaos incarnate. And there was the human factor. Calculation time. 2 seconds to estimate, adjust, and fire. 2 seconds in which a Zero, moving at 300 miles, covered almost 900 feet. 3 football fields. By the time your math was done, your target was gone. In Pensacola, trainees practiced on toed sleeves fabric targets flying straight and level like docile cattle. Gunners who scored top marks there came to the Pacific and realized the hard truth. War didn't fly in straight lines. Some tried doubling their lead. Others resorted to saturation fire, filling the sky with bullets and blind hope. That tactic burned through ammo in minutes and worked even less often. Hit rates dropped to 2%. And so the weight of the sky pressed on them. Every engagement was life or death. Your job was to protect the pilot, the plane, the mission, and yourself. But your weapon, your training, your faith in the manual had betrayed you. You watched your tracers miss. You watched the Zeros dance. You watched your comrades fall burning into the sea. And then, one day over Rabaul, Richard Parker stopped following the rules. The shadow of failure. It began in July 1943 on his 4th combat mission. A Japanese Zero swept in from directly astern, its cannon fire flashing like lightning against the Corsair's tail. Parker fired 3 bursts, textbook perfect half, a wingspan of lead. Just as the manual prescribed, each burst missed cleanly. The Zero's shells tore through the left wing, punching holes through the fuel tank. Somehow, Lieutenant Morrison coaxed the crippled aircraft back to the carrier, One engine dead, fumes in the tank, sheer luck in the air. When they landed, Morrison said nothing. He didn't need to. Parker felt the verdict in the silence between them. He had failed not through cowardice, but by following the very rules meant to save him. That failure stayed with him, gnawed at him through 4 months of missions, through every engagement where he fired by the book and watched Zeros dance through his tracers untouched. The bitter truth was that it wasn't just him. Every gunner in the Pacific was living the same nightmare. The doctrine of denial. The Navy's response: more training, more discipline, more faith in a broken system. Squadron commanders received crisp memoranda from headquarters: uphold proper deflection technique, ensure procedural precision, maintain unit standards. None of these orders admitted the truth that the entire doctrine was built on false assumptions about how aerial combat actually worked. Still, a few restless gunners began experimenting on their own. They led farther, aimed higher, trusted gut instead of geometry. Most of these experiments ended the same way as smoke over the ocean. But sometimes, just sometimes, a burst connected. No one could explain why. They only knew that maybe, somehow, there was a better way. The turning point. Then came November 7th, 1943, and Parker's accidental revelation over Rabaul. It wasn't luck. It wasn't instinct. It was repeatable. He'd aimed 8 to 10 aircraft lengths ahead of his targets into thin air, and the bullets had met the enemy perfectly, 3 times in a single mission. But he didn't know if lightning could strike twice. 3 days later, November 10th, he'd get his answer. The second test. The mission. Bomber escort over Bougainville. Parker's Corsair flew among 12 aircraft guarding B-24 Liberators on a strike against Japanese supply dumps. Before takeoff, Morrison leaned toward him in the ready room and said, "If we see Zeros whatever you did last time, do it again. Don't care what the manual says." Parker climbed into the gunner's pit, his stomach in knots. The first success still felt like a fluke. Now he was supposed to repeat it, on purpose, to aim at nothing and trust that the enemy would appear there. At 0900 hours, black puffs of flak speckled the sky. Then Morrison's voice cut through the intercom. 4 Zeros, 2 o'clock high coming fast. Parker swung his turret, saw them diving from 15,000 feet, needle-nosed, fire in their bellies. Training screamed at him, "Wait. Let them close. Calculate the lead." But instead, he aimed 12 aircraft lengths ahead of the lead Zero pure estimation, not math. He fired. The 50s thundered. His shoulders slammed into the mount. The smell of cordite burned his throat. The tracers vanished into nothing, and then the lead Zero's canopy shattered. The plane nosed over and plunged in a column of smoke toward the jungle below. Parker pivoted to the second. This one was turning mid-dive, so he aimed even farther ahead. Fired again. The left wing snapped off clean. Another kill. 2 in 10 seconds, Morrison shouted, disbelief edging his voice. Parker couldn't answer. His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he knew. It hadn't been luck. It was real. The other 2 Zeros peeled away in panic, disappearing into the clouds. Proof in fire. When the enemy regrouped, 6 this time, they attacked from every angle. Parker engaged 3 within 40 seconds. 1 confirmed kill, 1 damaged, 1 missed. That last miss mattered. It proved his method had limits. Led too little, you missed. Led too much, you still missed. But when you got it right, the results were devastating. His hit rate, 60%, 10 times better than the Navy's average. When Morrison landed the Corsair at 11:30 hours, Parker's gun barrels were scorched. 5 enemy aircraft had fallen or limped away from his fire. The best gunnery performance his squadron had ever seen. Defiance and discovery. The squadron commander was waiting on deck. He demanded to know Parker's secret. Parker explained. The man frowned, declared it contrary to established doctrine. Parker nodded. It was. Morrison just shrugged. "It works," he said flatly. The commander promised to forward the findings to Pensacola for evaluation. Until then, Parker was to follow standard procedures. No unverified methods. No improvisation. When the officer walked away, Morrison turned to Parker. "Ignore him," he said, and Parker did. The science behind the Sky 3 forces made Parker's impossible method succeed. Bullet flight time, human reaction delay, and Japanese aggression. Standard deflection shooting assumed bullets were instantaneous. They weren't. A .50 caliber round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, but at combat ranges 300 to 500 yards, it still took between half a second and 1 full second to reach the target. In that time, a Zero moving 300 mph traveled 220 feet, nearly 3/4 of a football field. The manual told gunners to lead by maybe 20 feet. By the time their bullets arrived, the target was 70 feet ahead. A guaranteed miss. Parker's method corrected that gap aim not where the Zero is, not slightly ahead, but where it will be when the bullets arrive, 8 to 12 aircraft lengths ahead. Visually absurd, mathematically flawless. Then came reaction time. From the instant a gunner spotted a target to the moment the first bullet fired, nearly a third of a second passed human neurons, finger tension, mechanical cycling. In that brief delay, the Zero moved another 50 feet. Parker wasn't doing the math consciously. His brain had learned it from failure, pattern, and repetition. The final factor? Pilot behavior. Japanese Zero pilots attacked with ferocity, diving and turning in predictable arcs of aggression. A diving Zero would continue its dive for about 2 seconds before pulling up. A turning Zero would complete at least 1 full rotation before reversing. Once you learned these rhythms, once you read the fight, you could predict where your enemy would be. Parker had learned it the hard way. 8 months of misses, every tracer line teaching him what math couldn't. Passing the torch. But one man's discovery couldn't change a war. Parker began teaching others. The first was Tommy Chen, aviation machinist's mate second class, a frustrated gunner with 6 months of failure. One night in the ready room, he asked how Parker had suddenly become unstoppable. "Aim way ahead," Parker said. "Not at the Zero at where it's going to be." Chen frowned. "That's aiming at nothing." "Exactly," Parker said. "You aim at nothing, and trust the math." 2 days later, November 13th, Chen tried it over Rabaul. His tracers met a Zero head-on. 1 burst, 1 kill. When he landed, he found Parker on the deck and said 3 words. "It actually works." Word spread faster than any official memo. Gunners whispered about the extreme lead technique. Parker drew diagrams on scrap paper, showed hand distances, explained how to see the future of a Zero's flight. Some scoffed like Robert Hayes, who insisted the Navy couldn't be wrong, until he tried it. 2 kills later, he stopped arguing. How ideas travel when orders won't carrier air groups rotated, squadrons shuffled decks and duty. Liberty calls spilled men into the same port cities, the same bars, the same late-night conversations. A gunner from Parker's outfit might bump into a counterpart from another ship in a Sydney bar. They'd trade stories, what worked, what didn't, what got you home. Parker's approach would surface in a sentence, a sketch on a napkin, a gesture showing, aim here, not there. The other gunner would try it on his next hop. If it worked, and often it did, he'd bring it back to his own ready room and pass it along. Aviation machinist's mate first class, James Wilson VF-17, heard it in January 1944, doubted it right up until he watched Parker demonstrate during a joint training flight. Wilson carried it back to VF-17. Within 3 weeks, the squadron's hit rate doubled. When the CO asked what changed, Wilson explained. The answer came wrapped in the same contradiction everyone was living with. No official endorsement, no formal prohibition. Use the approved method, said doctrine. Use what works, said reality. Pragmatic commanders read the scoreboard. If gunners were hitting more and losing fewer, they didn't interrogate the how. They let results speak. The underground syllabus of survival. By March 1944, the technique had reached at least 15 squadrons across 4 carriers. It wore many nicknames: extreme lead, future point shooting, the Parker method, but never an official title. It circulated the way all frontline knowledge does, gunner to gunner, from those who had seen Zeros fall to those who needed to survive their next sortie. It didn't appear in after-action reports. It wasn't printed in training manuals. It lived in chalk marks on bulkheads, in handspans and eye lines on flight decks, in the quick geometry of men with no time to waste. Some units tuned their own variants. 12 aircraft lengths instead of 8, altitude tweaks for drop, distinct estimates for head-on versus crossing shots. Yet the heart of it never changed. Aim for where the target will be when the bullets arrive, not where it is now. By mid-1944, the practice had spread through the Central Pacific, the South Pacific, and west toward the Philippines. The enemy notices and misreads. By April 1944, Japanese pilots felt the difference. American rear gunners, easy to shake half a year earlier, were suddenly striking with unsettling precision. Intelligence summaries reported something uncanny. Tracers hanging far ahead in seemingly empty sky, only for Zeros to fly right into them moments later. Imperial Japanese Navy aviation intelligence drew the wrong lesson. They concluded the Americans had fielded a new gun sight technology, a predictive system that computed future positions. The simple truth that Americans were manually aiming much farther ahead seemed too crude to be credible. So the countermeasures chased a phantom. Pilots were told to become more erratic, to change direction more often and vary speed more sharply in order to break the supposed computers. In practice, physics betrayed them. A hard turn commits an aircraft for at least a second. A steep dive holds its line before recovery. Those random inputs created readable patterns. An American gunner using Parker's method could see the turn begin and fire at where the Zero must be mid-arc. The more violently the Zero maneuvered, the more predictable its immediate future became. Other prescriptions followed: attack from dead astern, dive faster to compress reaction time, swarm from multiple angles. Each answer stumbled because it assumed complex American calculations that weren't happening. Parker's method relied on rapid visual estimation, not slide rule math. A seasoned gunner could snap from target to target, lay in a new future point in under a second, and let the enemy fly into it. Multiple attackers simply meant multiple chances. The result? By summer 1944, Zero loss rates to American rear gunners had climbed by 300% compared to late 1943. Japanese commanders knew something had shifted, but technical intelligence found no new American gun sights, no revised gun systems, no aircraft mods that justified the leap in accuracy. The misconception endured. Captured documents later showed Japanese analysts still writing, even in August 1944, about mechanical computers in American gun positions, non-existent devices used to explain very real hits. They were describing Parker's principle through a lens of assumed technological superiority. Training never pivoted to counter the actual method. Pilots learned evasions meant to foil predictive machinery, when what mattered was human judgment at the guns. They taught random weaving when steady flight with sudden breaks would have been harder to read. They emphasized high-speed dives when medium-speed attacks from unexpected vectors would have shortened a gunner's estimation window more effectively. If only someone had asked the right captured airman the right question. The secret was brutal in its simplicity. Aim farther ahead. No black boxes, no magic optics, just different aiming points. But that revelation never landed. Outcomes that change a war's arithmetic. By mid-1944, American bomber formations that had bled 10 to 15% of their aircraft to zero interceptions in late 1943 were losing 3 to 5%. Some of that was better fighter cover. Some reflected attrition among experienced Japanese pilots. But a significant share came from rear gunners who were finally hitting. The deeper issue for Japanese aviators remained unchanged. They were fighting an enemy tactic they did not understand. Recognition. After the shooting stopped, official credit lagged behind reality. Only in 1946 did the Navy complete a comprehensive gunnery study, parsing combat reports from every carrier squadron in the Pacific. The verdict was stark. Units employing extreme lead deflection achieved 3 times the kill rate of units clinging to standard doctrine. The report concluded that unauthorized field modifications to technique had materially boosted American air superiority in the war's final 2 years. By then, the fleet had already internalized the lesson. Post-war, Pensacola quietly adjusted its curriculum. Instructors began teaching larger lead angles under a new label dynamic deflection shooting. The manual never named Parker, but the pages mirrored what he had discovered over Rabaul in November 1943. The idea leapt services and theaters. Army Air Force's tail gunners in B-17s and B-24s over Europe adopted parallel methods against BF-109s and FW-190s, same physics, same payoff. By early 1945, the technique was standard across American gun positions. Then came Korea, and the jet age. MiG-15s were roughly 300 mph faster than WWII adversaries, so leads stretched to 50 out of 20 aircraft lengths. The principle didn't blink. Predict, aim, fire. The method scaled with speed. Vietnam shifted the fight again, rotors instead of props, ground targets instead of interceptors. But the deflection truth held. Door gunners engaging trucks along the Ho Chi Minh Trail aimed for where a vehicle would be 2 seconds later, not where it was. A technique born a quarter-century earlier in a different war still saved lives. Modern air combat has sidelined human gunners. Missiles ride radar, bombers lean on electronic countermeasures, turrets talk to computers. Those computers now do in milliseconds what Parker learned to do in half a second. The equations haven't changed, only the clock has. The silicon follows Parker's principle. The man behind the method, Richard Parker, lived to see peace. He flew 43 combat missions as a Corsair rear gunner, credited with 17 confirmed and 9 probables. In January 1945, he made Aviation Chief Machinist's Mate and received the Distinguished Flying Cross for actions over Rabaul, the citation praising exceptional gunnery accuracy, omitting the revolution behind it. After the war, he went home to Sacramento, California, worked 32 years as an aviation mechanic for Pacific Airlines, married, raised 2 daughters. He rarely spoke of the war, except with those who understood its grammar. His method became so commonplace that most who used it never knew its author. They only knew it worked. Parker died in 1991, age 70. His obituary noted his Navy service. It did not say that thousands of American airmen lived because one machinist's mate aimed into empty sky and trusted what he'd learned the hard way. And the principle he proved over Rabaul Harbor still shapes how militaries think about fast-moving targets, not by worshipping gadgetry, but by understanding how bullets and bodies move through space and time. 17 confirmed kills, hundreds taught, thousands spared. All because one man ignored the manual and aimed not where the 0 was, but where it would be. If this story resonated, tap the like button and subscribe for more untold histories from World War II. And tell us, where are you watching from? Texas or Tasmania? Veteran or history buff? You're part of this community. Thank you for watching and for keeping these stories alive.